Pictured here is my great-grandfather, Harvey Russell Hathaway. Harvey, better known as Russell, was born on August 26, 1902 in St. Joe, Indiana. Before we dive into his life, I think it's best to explain when his ancestors arrived to America. Russell's eighth great-grandfather, Nicholas Hathaway, emigrated from Gloucestershire, England in 1639 to come to the New World with his 10-year-old son, John Hathaway. John ended up being a wealthy landowner, leader of the community, and made successful investments in the iron industry. Fast forward 275 years later, and we would see Russell leaving his footprints in the community as well. He grew up in a small country town with his older brother Clayton. His parents, Henry and Retta Hathaway, raised him, and being in a country town, everyone had their chores. He found himself working at Sheckler's Pickles for summers, which is still a running business today. Aside from helping out at home, my great-grandfather was able to uphold other priorities as well. In this photo, he is at St. Joe Elementary in 1914, and he remained an exceptional student in his hometown. Along with his studies, he and his brother Clayton were athletes at St. Joe High School. Clayton was a football player, whereas Russell played basketball and was quite the trailblazer for the future athletes in my family. Following high school, my great-grandfather moved to Springfield, Ohio to begin his college years at Wittenberg University. He continued being an involved student as a member of the dorm league for Myers Hall. He decided against joining a fraternity because at that time, fraternities were segregated and excluded blacks, Asians, and so on. He felt that this wasn't right, so he became a part of the dorm league instead. A funny story from his college experience is that one Halloween, Russell and some of his friends put a cow in Belfry Tower, which is pictured here. They couldn't figure out how to get the cow out after Halloween was over. My great-grandfather loved his time at Wittenberg, and he ended up being class president his senior year. His parents were not college educated, so therefore he felt very thankful to receive his education. My great-grandfather took on a few years to teach and save money for medical school. Unfortunately, his teaching certificate is not amongst my living family members. Despite it not being the best pay, he was able to eventually attend Western Reserve University in Cleveland. He later on graduated in 1930. The next stop for him would be Lakewood Hospital, located in the western suburbs of Cleveland. He met his wife Lila at Lakewood, and they later married in 1934 at Trinity Lutheran Church. Lila was a nurse at Lakewood, and together they continued their careers. Despite getting married during the Great Depression, they were able to start a family shortly after. On September 10th, 1937, my grandfather Harvey Russell Hathaway Jr. was born. Following his birth came their other children, Dave, Mel, and Shirley. There were times where they had to ration things or opt out of sugar and butter due to economic changes as a result from Pearl Harbor, World War II, and other events. He had a lot of interesting events happen while he was a doctor. There was one incident where he had to perform an emergency tracheotomy on a boy choking in a restaurant. By making this incision, he was able to save the boy's life. He also helped a patient who was giving birth to a set of twins. One twin was fertilized naturally, whereas the other twin was fertilized in the abdominal cavity. He was able to successfully deliver the twins, and this case was later published in the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Aside from caring for his patients, he also took care of those at home. His wife Lila unfortunately suffered from a series of strokes, which started around 1964. They were gradual over the years, and over time, she eventually became incapacitated. Russell felt it was best that he didn't put his wife in a home, and he took care of her until he suffered from a stroke as well. Harvey Russell Hathaway passed away on November 24th, 1975. He lived up to what he thought was the American dream in his profession, and he felt very strongly about the values he took to heart. My grandfather followed his footsteps and advice as a physician to remember that every time a patient was in his office, to give his very best. As stated before, my great-grandfather loved his time at Wittenberg University. He continued his connection with his alma mater by being on the Board of Trustees later in life. After his death, the board established a scholarship which is given to a deserving medical student every year to honor his service. In addition to his love for education, he loved the natural world. He enjoyed experiencing forests in places such as Canada and Wisconsin. So, to carry on his legacy, the Hathaway Preserve was established at Russ Run in Indiana. Engraved here is a written dedication at the Hathaway Preserve. Today he is buried alongside his wife in St. Joe Cemetery, and he is well remembered throughout St. Joe, Indiana, and Cleveland, Ohio.